Hey everyone, Mecha here, and you are listening to a Fire Emblem The Last Promise character guide. The Last Promise is a fan-made ROM modification of Fire Emblem 7, and it has its own story and its own set of characters, and it's really fun to play. So if you're out of Fire Emblems to play, or you just really like GBA Fire Emblem, it really is for you, and this can be a great guide to get started and decide on which characters you feel like training. Of course, I am making this in a tier list maker, but it is in fact not a tier list, so it's a little bit different than the characters at the top and at the left are better than the characters on the bottom and on the right. In fact, don't pay attention to the order at all. Instead, look at these categories and decide which of these characters seem like the most fun to you to use, while also being practical, because using, for example, all the characters in high effort on your first playthrough might not go so well. You can still do it, like all these characters are usable, literally all of them, but some of them are a little bit more difficult to use than others. And some of them, you might want to know how to invest in them optimally to make them as good as they can possibly be. I'll get into those as we're getting to the individual characters. Let me go over the categories first, so you know what I mean here. So no-brainer are, for character guides, usually characters that I think are just really good, like overpowered good. Last Promise doesn't really have any of these. It just has a lot of good characters, but these are two characters that I recommend training regardless of your playthrough, especially for your first playthrough, because it will just make things more convenient. These are both Lord characters, characters that are sometimes force deployed or sometimes forced into a situation where they have to do combat. Anakin is a dancer Lord. He's kind of like a cross between a monk like Lucius and a dancer like Nils. So he revitalizes people, but he can also do combat. Don't worry about the combat too much, you could just use him as a dancer if you like, but you should always use him. He's force deployed anyway during Anakin mode, which is the main story. It's Eliwood mode basically, whereas Siegfried is the Lord of Siegfried mode. You know, the name kind of speaks for itself. So you should use Anakin when you get him. Don't worry about training him in Siegfried mode. He appears for one chapter before he leaves again. Him and a couple of other characters that joined at that time, like Ace and Eduardo, they join for like one chapter in Secret mode, but you don't have to train them there at all. Their level gets reset anyway, so don't worry about that. Instead, try using him in Anakin mode when you get him. He has a pretty early promotion for a Lord character. It's like chapter 17 or so where he promotes, or like chapter 18. Don't worry about hitting level 20 before promotion, because he will always be useful as a dancer, and his combat is always going to be kind of it's there. I've seen people say they trained him to 20 before promoting and it worked out well for them. But don't feel like you need to do this. He uses light magic, which is okay. His magic is just kind of like, at first the enemies are so weak that he can probably get close to one running, but later on I feel like the enemy HP gets too high. And dancing is always going to be good anyway, so don't worry about it. But if you want to train him, go ahead. Then we have Kelek. He is a no-brainer. He is actually a good combat unit, and you should train him. He promotes using a Heaven Seal, which you'll get later on, kind of around the same time that you would get a Heaven Seal in FE7 regular, like vanilla. He is not available in Siegfried mode. He's like an NPC for one chapter, but you only get him starting like chapter 12 of the main mode. And he's very good. He's basically an equivalent of a swordsman, like a Myrmidon Swordmaster kind of guy. His class names are different because he's a self-insert, so he has his own class names and his own animations too. Honestly, part of the reason that I want to recommend using him is because his animations are so funny. But the great thing about him is normally in GBA Fire Emblems, the big problem with sword-locked units is they don't have one-to range and low movement sometimes, but mostly the one-to range and bad weapon triangle situation. The weapon triangle doesn't really matter because enemy distribution is more equal between like lances, axes, and swords. So whereas normally in FE7 you'd be up against a bunch of lance users with someone like Lyn or Eliwood, Kelek is up against a more equal distribution of enemies. Not quite equal, but it's better for him. But the other thing is he has one to range. He has a personal weapon called the Flamberger. I think that's how you pronounce it. People told me a while ago when I was playing Last Promise, and I promptly forgot. But you know what it is when you see it. I think on stream I always call it the Flamberger or whatever. It's a powerful one-to-range sword, and since Kelek is the only one to use it, the only way to get utility out of it is to make him use it a lot. You get one for a while, and then if you unlock a secret guidance chapter, you can get another one. That one is easy to miss if you're playing for the first time, but if you look up how to get it in a guide, you can get it pretty easly, and you'll have enough uses for the rest of the game from there. So use it whenever you feel like it's convenient for you, whenever it's nice. Don't feel like you have to conserve it a whole lot, but don't use it on every single enemy, and you'll be okay. And he's actually like really good. And in the end game, he gets another really powerful weapon that makes the end game a lot easier. Imagine if like Soul Cody and Durandal were good weapons. That's kind of what his personal sword is. Not even going to spoil what it is, even though it doesn't really matter. But he's just going to make endgame really easy for you if you train him, and he's just a pretty good unit in general. So that's why I recommend using them, because if you don't train him, there's a couple things you'll miss that you'll probably want to get just for a complete playthrough. If you're playing for the second time or onwards, you're just watching this to see if your opinion matches up to mine, it probably won't, and you can get away without using Kelek or Anakin for that matter. But this is what I'd recommend to new players. Then we get to good and the two good categories. I think both of these characters are good. I guess I forgot to explain the different categories a little bit more in depth. I just went in no-brainer. But good less investment is basically units that don't need as much investment. They just start off kind of good, and they can get better. Some of them have better payoff of using them than others. No one really neatly fits into into one of these categories, so some of them had to push a little bit. But these are all pre-promotes that start off pretty good, and then they might fall off, or they might get better, or they might stay good for the rest of the game after they join, depending on who they are. Good with more investment means they're good, but they need training. That's really it. These are all non-pre-promotes except for Liquid, who we'll get into. So all these are units I would recommend training fairly highly, but don't feel like you're missing out too much by not doing it. They're all pretty fine. Okay, units are units that I don't really like training as much. They generally take more investments than you get out of them, or they're pre-promotes that I don't think are that good. It really goes for the last three here. So most of these are fine to train. Like, don't feel like they're bad. Like, everyone is usable in the last promise, and some of them have pretty good turnouts. They're just higher effort than the other ones. Speaking of high effort, these 5 are units I would not recommend training on your first playthrough unless you feel like using a meme unit, which is a perfectly understandable instinct. If you like these characters, by all means, start using them. You'll probably notice why they're considered high effort, or on a tier list like low tier, but they're not unusable. No one is. And if you like all 5 of them and you want to use them all, go right ahead. Just know it's going to be a little bit more painful than using other characters. It'll be more tedious, but the returns are also like funny because you're using a high effort meme character, which is also good. And utility, this is the lowest tier visually, but these units are not worse than everyone else. Utility is just units that are basically not combat units, but they do something else, and that something else is hard to compare to combat units. You should probably use these as you see fit. So there's like 2 healers in here. There's like 3 healers in here, and a thief and a convoy. That's why that utility tier is there. Okay, so we've gone over Anakin and Kelek, so let's get into good less investment. So Siegfried is in good less investment, and he's pretty fine. He joins in the right away, and his growths are really good. So his bases are not as good as like Marcus or Seth or Titania, but he's still pretty powerful early on. He doesn't like one route everything ever, but he can set up kills for others and also gain decent XP by himself. This game is in FE7's normal mode, so the XP gain is higher than you'd expect, and so he gets to use his growth quite a lot. As long as you just don't like solo the whole game with him, you'll be fine. And you should use him when you have him. If you feel like he's fallen off, like he's not as good as you would hope for, feel free to drop him too. It's fine. He's never forced into combat later on, so don't worry about him too much. But he's pretty fine. I was like half considering putting him in more investment because of the growth and the fact that his bases don't really hold up super well as the game goes on. But at the same time, he does start off better than most of your characters, so he's a little bit of an awkward fit into this kind of a list. That's why I had to like kind of push him somewhere. But generally he's fine. You should use him, especially like in Siegfried mode where you don't have many other characters. There's no reason not to use him. He's force deployed everywhere. He's super powerful. He can use like all the lances and the swords you get. He has a personal sword that like one KOs enemy mages, which is super nice. The Nothung. All these are just stellar traits, and even if you don't like using him for combat, the rescue drop he provides is super nice. So definitely recommend using him. Noah is weird. He is a hero that joins in... sorry, there was a fly in my face, so I don't know if you can hear that. He joins in Siegfried mode for a little bit, and then he's also around for Anakin mode. But in both of those, his recruitment is a little bit obscure, so make sure to look it up. I could explain it here, but you should play this game with a guide anyway if you want to recruit everyone, so there's no point like spending time on these kind of things. But when you have him, he's generally just really good in Siegfried mode, and he holds up fine in Anakin mode. I wouldn't use him for the entire game, but I've always fielded him for like a couple chapters in both, just because I wouldn't have like every single unit I wanted to use ever. He's going to be better than most units you have until a certain point, and then he might fall off, he might not. I don't even remember what his growths are. I just remember he's like okay, he's fine. Definitely recommend using him if you like him, but he's not super spectacular late in the game, I think. Haas is another pre-promote that joins in Siegfried mode. You get like, imagine if there was like 3 pre-promoted Wallaces in Lin mode. That's basically Siegfried mode. He's really good for the 2 chapters you have him in Siegfried mode, and you should always use him when you can. He's not a great training target, but you know, if an enemy needs to get out of the way, and enemy density is really high in Siegfried mode, so there's no reason not to use him. But you don't get him back until much later. Imagine like Lin mode Wrath. That's kind of how late you get him back. And the chapter where he rejoins, you can actually clear it before he joins. So kind of like Eric around Cormac from Sacred Stones, if you think about it. At that point, he's still usable, if I recall. I never really trained him long term, or like used him as a member of my team long term, but I think he's pretty fine for when you have him. It's funny that like the chapter before he joins is like a bunch of wyverns that you really wish you could use him against, but unfortunately, he joins 1 chapter too late for that. But he's a fine promoted Nemo Trooper. Don't hate him, but you might have better units at that point. But you might not. That's why he's in less investment. Levion is a paladin that joins in the same chapter as Haas, but from the start. He's also around for 1 chapter early on in the story, in chapter 12. His inventory and his stats do not carry over to when he rejoins. So, for example, he joins with a Dragon Axe. You should trade that off him to someone else if you have the space. You only have Kelik and Altaris for that chapter. You should trade the Dragon Axe to someone else, because it's a really nice weapon in general. Levion can use it well, but I think he gets another one when he rejoins, so that's a little thing to keep in mind. Levion himself, in chapter 12, you should abuse the heck out of him because he's so powerful, and that chapter has like a turn limit before you can escape, so having Levion escape for you is just the fastest way to clear it. It's like an FE9 Arrive map, where it's kind of like a Siege map, but everyone can do it, so Levion is easily the best person to do that with, so use him in chapter 12, and then when he rejoins and he fits on your team and your unit slots, then go ahead and use him because his bases are pretty good. He's really tanky. He's not fast enough to double everything, but he's fast enough to do some work. And if you're playing like Iron Man, for example, he can easily replace like a falling unit. He's very solid base. I'm going to get into him for a second, skip 2 characters, because this is Howard. Another tricky character to recruit, so make sure to look it up. But in a lot of ways, he's similar to Levion. He's a much faster character and a bit less bulky, but good in a lot of the same ways, because they're both GBA paladins. You know, you can use swords, lances, axes, and they both have excellent stats, so you should use them both. The great thing about him, about Howard, is that he supports Sia, who's a character I heavily recommend using him because she's so fun. And they support with like a double animat support, which gives them both full avoid. Generally, supports in The Last Promise are very powerful. They grow faster than like FE7 or FE8 supports, and they often give better bonuses. So anytime a character can make use of them well, it's worth training them up, and this is a really good support pair. So definitely recommend that one. So that's Levion for you, or Levion and Howard. Back here we have Ash, another hero. This one joins on the earlier route splits in Anakin mode. There's a point where Logan comes up to you and he asks if you will willing to trust him, and if you say no, then you go to Ash's chapter, and if you say yes, then you go to Logan's chapter, basically. So you only get one of Logan and Ash's, of these characters, and you can see Ash is right here and Logan is right here, which is probably a good sign that Ash is the better choice if you want the better character. And because Ash is a pre-promoted hero, whereas Logan is like a Myrmidon, like Guy is, for example. So for Ash, the easiest way to imagine it is like, it's not really a hero to compare this to. It's kind of like, imagine Deke from FE6, where he's like promoted right away, like maybe Project Ember Deke, and then you get him like in chapter 13 in FE7. That's kind of like what Ash is. His speed base is enough to double at first. It kind of falls off at some point, but he does have a really good speed growth. So once he gains XP again, his speed will probably be up to par, but he's very good. He's very strong for that point in the game. You don't have any other pre-promotes in Anakin mode for a while, and he's also one of the few people with like reliable one-to-range. Like you have the Flamberge, and then you have him using hand axes, and that's kind of about it. So he can clear like entire squads by himself if you need him to. You should also use him to like set up kills for other people whenever you're like able to. But he can also just like clear a whole room by himself if you need him to. So super nice character to have for the short while you don't have many other alternatives. And if you feel like using him for long term because you think he's cool, and how can you not, because he has a scar across his face, so he must be cool, then you should keep using him. He's really good for that reason. And that goes for all these characters. Like, keep using them however long you feel like they're relevant, and then drop them if you want to, or keep using them if you like them. But Ash is the first pre-promote to join you and the only one you have for early Anakin mode, and the maps are a lot more tedious without him there. Then there's Liam, I think his name is. He is a ranger that joins roughly when you get a lot of other characters from Anakin mode back. He is, I think, the next pre-promote you get, and he's nice. The thing that always bugs me about Liam that I need to get out of the way is that this class is bugged. Most people get pretty good XP even though they're pre-promotes, but Liam does not. There's something wrong with his class power that like screws with the FE formula or the XP formula, and as a result he gets less experience than most people would. So where someone else might get like 5 or 10 XP from a round of combat, he might get like 1. So it'll grow kind of slowly, and that's unfortunate. His bases still hold up very well for that point in the game, and he can one round a lot of the enemies near him. His class is effectively the same as Haas's, but his is called the Ranger, like the FE8 Ranger, whereas Haas is an actual Nomad Trooper. I think that also means that Haas can like walk across rivers better than the Bow Knight can. I'm not entirely sure about that one. Bow Knight, is that what it's called? No, Ranger. Maybe Ranger can walk fine across rivers. I don't remember. It's not a very important detail. But yeah, they look a bit different, and they're getting XP differently. But other than that, Liam's bases are fine. Swords and bows are okay weapon type in this. Not excellent, but works well enough. So again, if you have space for him, by all means use him. I think I usually have space for 1 or 2 chapters after he joins, and then after that I start like using other characters. Howard we already went over when I talked about Levion. Then we have Leopold. I put this list up to a fellow Last Promise player, Rangor997. He's like, hey, I actually put Leopold in OK, which I can see. I haven't really gotten much XP with Leopold, so I actually wouldn't be opposed to moving him. Let me get into what he is first, right? So he's a Wyvern Lord that joins you optionally in a certain chapter around the time that Howard joins as well, and like around the dragon arc, I guess the Wyvern fighting arc. And when you have the option to get him, you can either get him or you get like a load of gold and the Salmeria Lance, which is an S-rank lance that is really, really good. I believe it stops arrow effectiveness and has like a stat bonus. I need to look it up, but it's not super important. The point is it's a really good lance with 1-2 range and a lot of power to it. So recruiting Leopold comes at the cost of some gold and really good lance that you probably want. Like that lance is really, really powerful. So there's an opportunity cost to using him. So that reason alone could be a reason to put him in OK, which I think I will do. His stats are like fine. He doesn't have enough speed to double consistently, I think, but he does have a lot of HP, bulk, strength, kind of like Vida, I guess is one character to compare him to. I'm making a lot of these parallels to make it easier to explain how good these characters are. He's not exactly the same as Vida, because Vida is in a game with slower enemies, and his stats are probably a bit better than Leopold's overall, but that's kind of like the vibe there we're going for, I think. So I think Leopold is like fine, but I wouldn't heavily recommend going for him because the opportunity cost and because he's not even that super great to begin with. He's probably a bit worse, relatively speaking, than most of the characters in here. So yeah, I think moving him down to OK is justified. Next is Ellis, a Falcon Knight that joins fairly late in the game. The Pegasus Knight and Falcon Knights in this game generally are really good. We'll get more into especially Inanna here. Ellis is the only pre-promoted one. Much better than like Cyrene, for example, from FE8. Her bases hold up pretty well. It's not really a character, I guess, like kind of like Tanith, I guess is the best comparison for Alice. But her combat is just good. She flies around. She doesn't have infinite durability, but she's good enough to using it. And since the other Pegasus Knights are good, the triangle attack is actually viable in this game, and she has supports with both of the other Pegasus Knights, so that can make her really, really powerful. But there's a pretty big difference between using all Pegasus Knights and using only 2, and using all 3 makes them all better. But of course, that does mean you have to use all 3 Pegasus Knights, which you might not want to do. It's good, like I would say it's even optimal. It makes them all 3 like really, really good. But it really impacts how good they all are individually if you don't use them all. I think for Alice it has the least impact because she has no investment cost. She's just good right out of the gate, but it's going to impact Inanna and Liren a little bit more. But Alice, definitely recommend using her. When you have her like for free for 1 chapter, you just try her out, see if you vibe with her. And if you don't, then you just ditch her and use someone else. Gary is the closest thing to a Goto that this game has, because he's one of the latest joining characters, but he's also super powerful compared to the rest. Like the only characters that join after him are Frederick and Rachel, and they're much less powerful. Gary is a warrior with high rank axes and bows, and you have a lot of good ones that work really well with his high strength stat, his high bulk. I think his HP joins like capped. He still has like a couple levels to grow, He's just really, really strong when he joins. His joining area is a bit weird because the enemies near him like to get on terrain, so they're really tough for him and his friends to kill. But generally, in almost any context, he works very well. You get some like 3-range bows that you can flex his high strength with to just avoid counterattacks altogether. Have some funny snipe situations. Gary's very, very good, and you should always use him if you want to. Like you can choose not to use him, but you're shooting yourself in the foot. That's basically what I'm saying. He's very, very good. So that's good, less investments, just a bunch of pre-promotes that you should use for however long you think it's convenient, and you drop them if you want to, or you keep using them if you like them. I said this like 3 times now, but that's the way the category works. Next is good, more investment. These units you should train, and sometimes even give them like stat boosters or other resources to make sure that they get up to par, because obviously they don't work off the gate, like they'll fall off if you don't give them XP. So Sean is the last Lord. This game actually has 4 Lord characters. I don't think he's force deployed for a whole lot of maps, so that's why I didn't put him in no-brainer. But he's pretty nice overall. He feels bad early on because his strength is Garbo. Like, I'm just going to say it. His strength is Garbo and his HP is really bad too. So he's not going to feel like a character that can take a lot of hits or dish him out very well. But he does have a piercing sword, which is a personal sword that's kind of like the rapier that Eliwood has in FE7. But it has triple effectiveness. I think some weapons in this game have double effectiveness and some of them have triple. This one has triple, so whenever he's up against like an armor knight or a horse rider, he's going to have enough might to 2-shot most of the time. And his speed is good enough to double, generally speaking. If not, he can still go for 2 shots somewhere. The enemies in secret mode are absolute garbage, so it's not too hard to give him XP if you want to. At some point, he'll feel like he hits like an XP ceiling where he doesn't get much for killing anymore, and at that point you can kind of stop. But you should feed him enough to be viable at least. I'm not going to spoil exactly why, but just take it from me. He gets a really good weapon later on that you'll want to make use of. And if you don't train Sean, even that weapon is not going to save him. But if you train him just a decent amount, like say level 15 or so, he's going to be fine. There are some side quests involved to make him like really good. Like he has a specific line of like little secrets you have to unlock to make him like as good as possible. Make sure to follow that, and you'll be just like pretty happy with Sean overall. He won't disappoint you, not at all. Trust me. Inanna, I just noticed Sean and Inanna have like the exact same hair color and armor, but they're actually not siblings. They're not like the Warriors twins. Inanna's just the Pegasus Knight that joins early on. Probably the best Pegasus Knight in the entire GBA. Even though she's like in a modest, good, more investment thing. Rengar actually said you put her in no-brainer, and I agree with his reasoning, but I'm not sure if I would recommend it for new players because it requires a somewhat specific set of ways of using her. But if you know what you're doing, then yeah, Inanna's probably a no-brainer if you want to play optimally. But if you're just trying stuff out and you're not entirely sure, like you have to commit to it pretty hard. But if you do it, she's really, 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 really good. But if you don't want to commit to it super hard, then she's kind of about as good as these units. Probably the best of them still, but as I said, it's not ordered by how good they are. It's just ordered in the order they join, minus Leopold, who I moved down. But just know that you could put Inanna here, reasonably speaking. So the reason she's good is, well, first of all, arrows only have double effectiveness. Second of all, because she supports both the other Pegasus Knights, and they're all really good, especially when using conjunction. They give each other like, what is it, like 9 attack, 10 attack when they all support each other. And the supports are easy enough to build. Like, you don't have to end turn repeatedly to build them. They just kind of happen almost automatically. And you only need 1 A support between them all, and then just B supports between the others. And then the triangle attack in this game actually works to kill like a lot of really, really tricky bosses. It's like one general boss late in the game that has an iron rune that you cannot crit unless you use triangle attack, and then he just melts. That stuff is really funny. But yeah, that's pretty good. Another reason that Inanna is really good, and this is why we got into the investment part. There's a shop at the end of the Lin mode, at the end of Siegfried mode, that sells angelic robes, I think for 5,000 each, and they give plus 5 HP each. So a little different than the vanilla angelic robes. So in order to buy them, you're going to need to save up gold. You get some gold, but you don't get enough to buy a lot of robes. Unless you aggressively sell like all your elixirs and some stat boosters you don't need, and some other random things, you can buy a lot of robes there, and you can make someone like Inanna, who's normally like average durability, can become really good. The other thing Inanna has is that Siegfried mode has an Legion Whip, the only promotion item in all of Siegfried mode, and just like when Lin mode and vanilla, everything you have vanishes, like it just completely disappears when you get them back in Anakin mode. So there's no reason not to use every resource you have there on the units you have there. So those angelic robes, the only people you can use them on are people who are around in Siegfried mode. And there's not that many people that need them, so you should recommend focusing them all on a couple of units. And the best candidates are like Inanna, Sia, and Sean, and they all work on really well because they can improve their durability to become like very tanky. Like I've had like Sia is like a mage and Nana is like a Pegasus Knight, and I've had them both like end Lin mode basically at 50 HP, which is absurd. Makes them really tanky for, you know, what their classes would suggest. So that can make Inanna really good. The Elysian Whip, you get it in like one of the earlier chapters, actually, like not a joining chapter, I think. It might actually be a joining chapter. It's like very early on. You should hold off on using it as long as you can, and then promote her before the end of the mode. For me, usually I don't get her much further than like level 11 or level 12, maybe 14. Rengar says he's had her at like level 19 before, so it requires to feed a lot of kills to her. The XP gain you get is fine in Siegfried mode, and if you don't train many other characters, then it can definitely work. If you're using like 10 different people, then this method is gonna be either requiring you to like sandbag the rest of your team, or to sandbag Inanna basically. So the promotion might not actually work out that well for her. If she doesn't get enough strength or speed from leveling up a couple times before she promotes, it's going to be hard for her to keep up with the benchmarks required later in the game to like double and actually two-shot enemies. And I've had like an early-ish promoted Inanna before, and she kind of just turned into a utility Falcon Knight, where her combat wasn't great, but she could like rescue drop people very easily. And that was still very helpful for a couple chapters, but it made her more of a filler character, like in this category. But if you have a trained Inanna with a lot of robes and a promotion that was like late enough to where she got enough levels to get going, and then if you have like the support of Alice and Lyra nearby and the option to triangle attack, then she becomes really, really powerful. And in fact, most fast playthroughs of The Last Promise, like efficiency playthroughs, they make use of Inanna a lot because she's obviously the best way to go about it. Like she's the best flyer, the early flyer you get. She's the best early flyer you get, with enough speed to double, enough strength to 2-hit KO, etc, etc. There's also a lot of other stat boosters in Secret mode that she's like a good candidate for. You get like an energy ring probably, Draco Shield, stuff like that. So definitely if you use her, invest into her a lot and she won't disappoint you. Shuda. Initially I had Shuda in okay because I didn't think he was very good. But someone pointed out, I forgot who it was exactly, that Shuda's probably better than most people in okay. And I agree with that. It's like a mercenary, kind of like a Raven-like type. It's not as powerful as Raven is in FE7, but still reasonably good, and joins so early that you can make use of like all the Siegfried mode XP, maybe some stat boosters like the Angelic Robes to become like really bulky, and then you can reasonably promote Shuda around the time they rejoin. I forgot exactly when you get your first hero crest. I think it's like the chapter after he joins. So if he's ready to promote and you promote him, he just has hand X's and he just pwns everything for the rest of the game. So pretty standard hero fare. Their stats will probably exceed the pre-promote heroes you have, like Noah and Ashe, if you feed them like a lot of kills and some stat boosters. So in that way, they're like a good investment, and the one to range from hand X is really nice. So good investment project. Like obviously there's some drawbacks like no mount or whatever, but for a casual player, I don't think that matters too much. So that's Shuda. Just a good mercenary hero kind of person. Alright, Kevin, one of my favorite units to use because he's so funny. I think Kevin has the highest availability in all of The Last Promise. You get him fairly early on in Siegfried mode, but you also get him early on in Anakin mode. Like he's around for the entirety of Anakin mode. So in that way, if you want a character that's always around, that's always a good thing. Kevin is an armor knight, and so he has a lot of bulk. I mean, they just put Trek in armor, so what are you expecting? My Kevins have always been ridiculously blessed, and so I really enjoy using him. But I can't pretend he's a no-brainer because usually his stats are not as broken as mine were. If you watch my Last Promise Iron Man, you might remember that I've always been using Kevin for like meme purposes, and he always turned out really well. For most players, I think Kevin works out fine as an armor knight. I mean, the general promotion bonuses are really good. His bases are sufficient to take hits at least. If he's just at base, like if you didn't use him at all in Siegfried mode, then he's not going to be a super great tank. I think he actually like takes damage from most things. But with enough level ups, he's just going to tank everything. Of course, you have to like accommodate his mobility a little bit, like rescue drop him around when he's unpromoted to get into places, because 4 move is a lot less than like the 5 or 6 or 7 move that you have on other characters. But if you can do that, then he holds up just fine. You do have someone like Eduardo or Karina to rescue drop him around early on. So as long as you make use of that, you should be able to keep up and then use like the early Night Crest to promote to general and become very, very powerful. It's worth noting in Last Promise that if you're into that kind of stuff, you do get quite a few boots pairs actually. You get one from Secret mode if you killed a certain boss in Gaiden. He's hard to get to and hard to kill, but if you can get that pair of boots, it's really nice. And then Kevin can get another pair of boots that you get in chapter 12 if you want to. And then I think you get another one like late in the game. So there's 3 pairs of boots you could potentially get if you enjoy making your general keep up with the rest of your units. I don't think that's necessarily the best investment in most games, but in Last Promise, I'm actually not like super hype on flyer utility because there's usually no time pressure on side objectives in this game, and there's not a whole lot of map you can really skip with a flyer. So that level of utility isn't really there. It's just the flexibility that flyer offers. Like, don't get me wrong, Ellis and Inanna and the other flyers, flying is super nice for them. Mostly for their own flexibility, but it doesn't really offer that much utility in Last Promise, I find. So I'm not super big on movement on like, I'm not super big on like overextending a flyer in this game, if that makes sense. Like, this is not a game where you just take someone like Heath or like a superpower Vanessa. You give them the boots, you fly into like 10 million enemies and kill them all. Like, the enemies in this game are just too bulky for that late in the game. And there's like a section of the game where you can probably do that, but it's not very long and it's not very difficult. So instead, I like to use my boots to make someone like Kevin really funny instead and give him like 11 move or whatever. It's really satisfying. So that's an option you can have. You also get an Ether Sphere, by the way, which is also, among other things, a movement booster. I won't spoil what the Ether Sphere is exactly, but it also gives +2 move, so keep that in mind. But is it 2 move? I think it might be 3 move, actually. It's really stupid. Sia is another one of my favorite characters to use. She is a mage. She joins early-ish in Secret mode and relatively early in Anakin mode. And so she's a great candidate for Angelic Robes because her durability is a bit of a problem, but the robes can solve that. And if you can solve that, you can make use of her excellent offense, like her high magic and her high speed, to one-round enemies. I think her speed is actually the better stat between her and her magic, but I always get a really good magic on her, so I'm a little bit biased in favor of her, but I think most people like Sia the same way I do, so no one is going to criticize me for this. But yeah, she has enough magic to kill most enemies. Of course, hitting on enemy resistance is generally a fail-safe way to kill them because resistance is kind of low. And there is a funny tome in this game called the Brave Tome, or the Hero Tome. Like it says on the tin, it hits twice as many times as other weapons, and it has reasonably high might as well. So even if you can't 2-shot them, you can usually like 3 or 4-shot them with that instead. You don't get infinite amount of those, but you do get to buy them at some point in the game. So that is really helpful for her offense if it is somehow lacking. But generally, Sia should be able to reach 2-shot thresholds at the very least. And I guess you can also heal after promotion, but that's not a super big priority for her. Generally, I just use her for offensive needs. And like having a mage with that much durability is so nice. It's just the easiest way to solve problems. Like sometimes you just put Sia on terrain or maybe with a Howard support, and she just decimates the entire army. She's one of the very few units who can like one-round late game, I feel like. So I really enjoy using Sia. There's not much to say about her, just use her and she's fun. Karina is a Wyvern Rider that joins laughably early in Anakin mode, and she is just really good at base. One of the best units you have at that point. She's not actually pre-promoted, but her bases still exceed like everyone else. I think she was like a self-insert for Blazer's girlfriend, and that's just why she's so good. One funny thing with Karina that you should do right away is fly her to the village in that chapter and visit it, because if she visits it, she get a white gem, whereas everyone else gets like I think a red gem instead, so you get more value if Karina visits it. I wonder why. You can sell that and buy like whatever weapons you need. So that's good, but even without that, she'd still be super powerful because, you know, doubling a one-hit kill is pretty good. There is a point, I feel like in Last Promise, where Karina actually falls off, where the enemy stats increase to a point where she can't really one-run anymore. I've had this problem like for several playthroughs in a row, actually, where Karina's stats just don't hold up. She doesn't become as powerful, relatively speaking, as someone like Heath or FE10 Har or Jill or someone like that. The enemies just kind of get too good. One thing that kind of hurts the flyers in this game that I've noticed is that the Legion Whips, you don't get as many. And you don't get them as early. Like, I think you get the first one around the chapter that you're fighting like the Wyvern Riders in, if I recall correctly, like around that time. Whereas everyone else can promote a bit earlier with like the Hero or the Night Crest. So they have a bit of a Lord situation where they promote kind of late. And that can kind of suck. So don't use too many of them at the same time and expect to promote them early, because it's not going to be able to happen. That said, they're all still good. And the whole triangle attack deal and like how good Inanna is with like investment completely overrides it. But I've found that Karina is a bit disappointing in the long term. But I really like her portrait, and I really like the way she plays in the early game, so I still always use her, at least for that time. And it takes me a lot of discipline to actually bench her because I like her that much. But, you know, sometimes I find that she misses benchmarks. Might just be personal experience, though. But she's still a good investment because, you know, she's a good investment. Itsuke is a mage like Sia, He joins very early in Anakin mode, but he's not around in secret mode, so he doesn't get the option of robing up. But other than that, he has most of the same pros that Sia has, like being able to use the hero's flare and having good offense overall with like decent magic and speed. So you can't really go wrong with Itsuka. It's just that Sia, if you're using a mage, will probably be preferred by most people, and not just because she's a girl. But Itsuka is perfectly fine in his own right. I enjoy using him anyway. I think I've trained him once or twice. He was pretty fine. I don't remember what his supports are like, his support options. I just remember he has a really good support with Howard. But, you know, Itsuka's good. Not much to say about him. Liren is not a Pegasus Knight, and what Itsuka is to Sia, I feel like Liren is kind of to Inanna, where she's just a Pegasus Knight option without the option of secret mode, but still decent enough in her own right to where you can train her fairly easily. She joins right before the chapter that's basically chapter 14 of FE7, you know, with Eric and a bunch of Cavaliers. That chapter is really easy to grind XP on. Not as easy for Liren as other characters, because I remember someone like Kevin or Sia would just one round the Cavaliers there for a bunch of easy XP, whereas Liren doesn't one round, I believe, but she's still like, it's easy to set him up for kills for her if you want to. So if you train her, it'll be really easy to do that. And like I said, build supports with the other Pegasus Knights. Wait a little bit with promotion, because the Legion Whip comes later than most promotion items, and she's solid. Kind of like Fiora, but joins a much earlier. Then we have Liquid. Liquid is the only promote in good more investment. It's kind of odd, but I think this is the right category for him, and Rengor agrees, so it has to be the correct thing. Liquid is a growth unit that joins relatively late in the game, same time as Haas. He's a Berserker. You see him the first time in Anakin mode, and he has a weird recruitment. You have to fight him once with Haas, and after that he will leave, and I think that's the way you unlock him. If there's more to it, it's in the guide. I'll link in the description. Make sure you recruit everyone, because it's funny. But he's a Berserker as a growth unit. The funny thing about his Berserker class is he has an inbuilt hidden skill silencer, the same as the Assassins. And what that does is half the time he crits, he gets that special animation, that little red flash, or I think for him it might be a different color flash. And it doesn't really matter much, because when a Berserker crits, you know the enemy's probably dead anyway. But it acts as like a mini Paragon, where it doubles the XP he gains for that round of combat, which is pretty cool. His growth are pretty solid. I think he has like good strength and speed growth. His accuracy can be a bit of an issue, but the Last Promise does give you a lot of gold, and at that point it's not much to spend it on. I mentioned that hero flares are a good investment, but there's like a secret shop around that time that gives you secret books as a option to buy, so you can have him read a couple of those. He doesn't look very intelligent, but he can read secret books, and then he has enough hits to get by. And the thing with Berserkers, right, is, as always, usually even if they don't hit both hits, there's a chance they'll crit with the hit they do hit, and then the enemy dies anyway. So the crits can make up for the misses that way. So that can be a nice way of compensating for his accuracy issues. But yeah, Liquid is solid when he's raised, but it does take investment at a point in the game where you might not feel like it. But like I said before, late in the game, enemies in Last Promise are bulky and strong and annoying to kill, so having another unit that can actually do that can be worth the investment. It depends on the rest of your army. I've had units like completely start struggling at that point in the game. For example, I've been using Eduardo from my last playthrough, and he was so off at handling the enemies at that point, I was better off not putting him in combat. So that could be a time where you bench some of your units and replace them with someone like Liquid. It's basically what I'm saying. And, you know, Berserkers are always just really fun to use. Like, I really enjoy using characters like Gonzalez and Dart when they're fully trained, because they just decimate everything. So at least you get some good unit feel out of it. Okay. Next up is a group of okay units that I personally don't really enjoy using that much for combat, but they are pretty fine. I'm not going to go into them too deep, because a lot of them are just kind of like inferior versions to units you already have. But, you know, just to give a complete overview. Corbin is one of the earliest units to join you. He's a Cavalier, and statistically I find him very disappointing. I like comparing him to Ford. Like, his name is similar, his armor is similar, and he's disappointingly similar in all the other ways. So I don't like using him, but early on in secret mode you don't have much of a choice. You'd only have like 3 units at that point, and it slowly grows. So you probably have to use Corbin a little bit and try him out. I found him really bad, but he's probably okay at the very worst. Like, he's not high effort, but he's just kind of cringe. Like, he doesn't have the piercing sword like Shun does. That's his main drawback compared to him. Of course, you don't have to choose. You can use them both. At least you can promote using the Light Crest if you're not using like Kevin, for example. So that can be okay. But yeah, not a fan of his stats, but his class is good, I guess. It's just late in the game, I feel like he would fall off really hard when the enemies start getting really strong. Ace is a soldier, the first playable soldier I got to play with because I didn't have Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn. So I've always had a soft spot for Ace. He and Eduardo join in Anakin mode, technically, but like I said before, all XP and everything else, all the other progress they make in secret mode is erased when they go to Anakin mode. They level back to their bases basically, so don't bother training him there, just start training him in Anakin mode. Early on you do have the opportunity to train Ace if you want to. It will slow you down, like definitely, but I think the novelty of using a soldier is worth it for me personally, so I still enjoy using him. But there's no denying statistically he's worse. I do believe the soldier class has a lower class power than most other classes, which doesn't affect his combat performance by itself. The game just thinks soldiers are worse than everyone else, but it does mean he gains more XP from combat than other units. So even if he's not killing, I find that he gets like a little bit more XP than others. It's kind of like the trainees in FE8 getting more XP for combat than other people. It's not that much of a difference. Like, it's not like Ross tipping someone with a hatchet and getting 30 XP, but it's more in that direction, you know what I mean? And yeah, I found it like after he's trained, he's pretty decent at combat. I've had runs where like Ace is like one of the few people who actually holds up late game. I think Halberdiers get a crit bonus too, which is helpful. Actually not sure about that one though, so don't quote me on that. He's fine. He gets a support with Anakin that's really fast. That can also be helpful. So decently trainable, definitely slows you down, but not absolutely hot garbage. Okay, so Eduardo is a Cavalier, and a pretty funny one at that. He joins very early on in Anakin mode, and like I said, he joins in secret mode as well, but you shouldn't train him there because his level gets reset. The charge lance that he has is his personal weapon. It's brave, which is a good first sign, but then the accuracy is absolute ass, and I think it weighs him down a little bit as well. So usually it's like a last-ditch resort or something. Like almost always you can get better odds of doing what you want to do with an Iron Lance than with that thing. But it's a funny personal gimmick and I appreciate it for that. Other than that, I remember his HP growth is either at or over 100%. So at least he's going to get a lot of health. But his other stats are kind of... yikes. I remember neither his strength, neither his speed, and neither his defense were good enough to keep up in the late game. So that's why he's in okay. It works out fine. I used him last run. He was really fun. Definitely entertaining unit, but not a very great one. So that's why he's in okay. Tycoon, I used him for first time last run. I always kind of leave him there, but he's probably the most interesting Myrmidon in the game, if you don't count Kelek as one. Just because he has a personal like set of animations and sprites that I really enjoy. Other than that, just kind of like Guy from FE7. I think like maybe slightly better stats. He has like a support triangle between Altares, himself, and Kelik. That's pretty good. It will up all their crit rates and stuff. Pretty funny sword trio to use that way if you like that. Just a crit happy swordmaster. He's really fun. Of course, he has all the problems of a sword lock unit in a GBA game, but besides that, you know, pretty entertaining. Wouldn't mind using them again, but it's mostly for the fun of it. Ben is a Wyvern Rider, pretty unique because I think the game says he trained in the Pegasus country, and so his resistance is higher, which means that I think like all his bases are 10. Like he joins very early on, and he has like a very balanced bases, and usually I find he's like subpar in the stats he needs to be good in. Like I think his strength is not good enough to 2-round, he doesn't double everything. He just feels kind of mediocre to me, but he's still a Wyvern Rider, and that class in itself, of course, has useful perks. Not as useful as in other games, because like I said, I don't think flying is as good in Last Promise as it is in other games, but it's still nice to have the flexibility to fly over terrain, rescue drop people around, all that stuff. But I don't like Ben's combat that much. I generally enjoy using Karina more if you're into using a Wyvern Rider. But there's no reason not to try him out for a little bit. He's force deployed for one chapter. Definitely give him a better weapon than his initial inventory. I think it's like a Slim Lance and a Short Spear. He definitely wants like an Iron Lance or something to just, you know, do damage. But he's alright, and you should keep him alive because he does recruit another character later on. I think he's the only one who can do that, so yeah, don't kill him off, just bench him if you don't want to use him. Don't let him die like in my Iron Man. But yeah, Ben is pretty fine. It's not terrible, but okay. This guy, I believe this one is Mark. There's like two axe guys. This one is okay. This one's a pirate that joins, I think like around the time you get most of your Anakin mode characters back, so he usually gets like the back seat for me. I used him for that one chapter he's around it and never again. It's kind of mediocre. I used him for that one run I just talked about, that same Iron Man playthrough, and his stats were pretty middling all around for like most of the game. But axe users are pretty rare in this game. I didn't mention that yet, but like the paladins can use axes, like high level axes, and then Liquid is there, but he joins kind of late. So if you want like an early-ish focused axe user, Your choices are like, well, you can use the heroes, I guess, or the paladins, or if you want like someone who only uses axes, Mark is kind of like your only option. So that's a novelty, I guess. And he's a pirate, right? So that's also pretty novel. Berserker's a good class, axes is a good weapon type, so I didn't hate using him, but there was never a time where I felt like it was particularly great. Just a regular ass dude. His stats are not as imbalanced as Dart. I think they're closer to like Ben's or like Physics Geese, I believe. It wasn't particularly stand out in any way. Then there's Rex. He's fairly late joining. He's not a playable soldier in this game alongside Ace. But he kind of joins ready to go. I think it's around level 10 when he joins. I wouldn't promote him instantly. I just keep training him for a little bit. It's not too tough because at that point the enemies are still pretty weak, so it's easy to set up kills for him, give him as many kills as he wants. So you just level him up a bunch, and then eventually you'll have to like, you get like a feeling for when you want to promote units, right? When he hits like level 16, 17, 18, you're like, okay, he's barely getting any XP from leveling. I'll just promote him. And once you do that, he'll be pretty serviceable. Halberdier is a fun class. I still don't remember if it has a crit bonus or not. Doesn't matter all that much in my judgment of him, because I don't think he's super great. But if you're in a mid game, you have like a free gun slot, you want to try him out, go ahead, give him a go. He's fine. I think he's like borderline high effort. I think it depends on how you use him. He's a shaman that joins around the same time as Sai over here. So like around the Dragon Valley chapter. It's like a lot of people that join around that time, isn't there? I think he joins promotion ready, but I don't think his basis supports an early promotion other than like using him for utility and maybe some chip damage. So if you want him to be a viable combat unit, you should probably train him up quite a bit before you promote him. And then becomes a druid, and yeah, I think he has the same promotion bonuses as Canas in FE7 vanilla, so he's pretty good from there. Instant promotion, I think it works if you just want heal utility, but other than that, I wouldn't love it, because he's not going to be very good at combat, and he can be a little bit better than that. But he joins a bit too late to be a high impact unit for most playthroughs, and he's not very rewarding to train up, but it's not undoable. He's not terrible, but there's an argument to be made to put him in high effort, I think. But the fact that he can heal after promotion and the fact that he's not as bad when he joins as the other ones, I think puts him in okay. This guy over here is Risk, Swordmaster that joins a little bit after you. Like you, not you watcher, but you know, you. He's the guy you can recruit with Ben, so if you want him to recruit him, you have to use Ben in that chapter. He's a Swordmaster, so you can do so without risk, haha, by leaving Ben out of his range and then swooping in. And then he's like right next to the boss, so either he or someone else can kill the boss, and then the chapter is over. You don't have to worry about anything bad happening anyway. His performance as Swordmaster, not spectacular. Like he's a Swordmaster, and just for like being in a promoted class, you could think he belongs in less investment, but his bases really don't support that. I don't remember exactly how good or how bad they are. The one cool thing about him is that his sword that he joins with, the Phoenixes, it has infinite uses. It's one of the very few infinite uses weapons in the game alongside the like the emblem weapons, and those aren't very strong. The Phoenixes is a bit stronger than the sword, even after the effectiveness of the sword, I think. So not a bad idea to recruit him, even if you don't like him, or if you don't want to use him. Not really reason to use him specifically, because anyone can use the Phoenix's sword. But yeah, as a Swordmaster, he's just kind of okay. He can double some of the slower enemies and kill them, and maybe even some of the semi-fast enemies, but not exactly spectacular at that point in the game. All the usual problems with a sword lock and no mount at that point apply. Like at that point, your character should be really, really strong. It's a much different game than it was like 3 chapters ago, so comparatively it doesn't look very good. But it's not high effort, you know, it's not that bad. This guy is called Shadow. I think his actual name, he says it's Thanatos, which is really funny to me. He's an assassin. He joins even later than that. He joins around the time that Sean becomes pretty good, and so there's like a pretty fierce competition for unit slots there. He doesn't keep up with the enemies very well, because he joins like right around the time that the enemy difficulty is going to like really bump up and be really good. He'll probably double. He's pretty fast, but unless he's getting the silencer one KO, he's probably not one rounding. And obviously doesn't have any supports build up. Sword locks, foot locks. He can use lockpicks though. I don't think he can steal. I don't think assassins can generally steal in this game. Altaris is an exception, because stealing is like his personal skill basically. But Thanatos I don't believe can steal, so not much use for that regardless. But you can use him to open a chest if you want. If you don't have chest keys, you can use him to open doors and chests. I've deployed him for that. It works just fine. Thieves already have 6 moves, so you don't really have an advantage for using an assassin instead. But if an enemy is like around to fight, then I guess he does better than an untrained Altaris. So you could just replace your Altaris with him if you haven't trained Altaris. That's one purpose for him. I could put him in utility for that, I guess, but because after he joins, there's not much thief utility, and because you do have door keys and chest keys, and because Altaris usually does fine anyway, even if he's untrained, I think it was worth it to give him like a separate slot in utility. But obviously, if you haven't trained Altaris, then feel free to use him as your quote-unquote thief. Frederick is a promoted general that is like the literally last character to join alongside Rachel, his daughter, Rachel. I think Rachel is how I usually name her. Frederick is fine, I think, at combat when he's around. He has high enough defense to tank a couple hits. I think his growths are like absurdly high, but so is his base level, so you're not going to see a whole lot of it. His joining situation in the actual chapter is like a little bit hectic to the point where you're kind of forced to use these two and try them out for a little bit, which I think is a good thing. He generally just is like bulky and fine. He's just not around for a whole lot, and after he joins, there's not a whole lot for him to do. But when you have him, you might as well try him out, see how he does. But he's not spectacular. He's no Gary, but he's not so terrible to call him high effort. Rachel is kind of the same, more of a sniper. Really close to Louise stat-wise, actually, but much later in the game. Pretty fast, has like an S-rank bow that does a lot of damage if you want willing to use it up. You probably won't have any other great bow users because, like, look at the competition. Like, who else are going to use with bows? I guess Liam or Haas if you like using them long term. But not a whole lot of great options for bows. So, if you like using one of every weapon type, for example, then Rachel could be a fun late game addition. I've had her kill a couple of people before in late game that I'm not going to say who they are, but she killed some late game bosses. Let's put it at that. It's definitely a fun thing to do. So I do recommend it for meme points. If you like Rebecca, you'll probably like Rachel just because they appeal to a lot of the same itches, I guess I could say. But yeah, she's fine. Leopold I went over. Initially I had him in good less investment and decided he could go down. So if you want to listen to that, might have to scroll back a bit. I don't think he's that great. Generally just don't recruit him. Take the Salmiria and the gold instead. But if you want to try him out for a spin, you know, just say yes, please join me, and you'll have a pretty good Wyvern Lord. High effort. So high effort does not mean terrible, unsalvageable, horrible. It just means in order to use these characters, you need to put a little bit more effort than for other characters. So that means they're usually under-leveled, they need some training, or their class might be worse than average, but they're still usable. They're still fine. Last Promise is not that difficult. You can definitely fit these units in. And in fact, my last playthrough, I used 3 of these units and did just fine. And the other 2, I definitely could have fit them in as well if I really wanted to. Arthur is very funny. He's a monk with, I believe, over 100% HP growth, but he also has some of the worst availability in the game. You'd think because he joins early on in Siegfried mode that he'd be around for a while, but after Siegfried mode is over in Anakin mode, he doesn't rejoin until Storm and Haas and Liquid, which is pretty far into the game, again, around that Dragon Valley kind of time. So imagine Lucius joins around the time of Urk, and then leaves, and doesn't come back until you're fighting Vida. That's kind of what Arthur feels like to me, which is not great. It's pretty late, and by that point, like, you're not gonna have a high level Arthur. He's not gonna be promoted or anything. He's gonna be like a level 10, 12, 14 monk or something. It's not that great. He's not gonna double anything. He's gonna die in a couple of hits. He does have like reasonable bulk for a magic user because of the high HP growth. He's not frail, but he's not gonna be a massive tank either because his defense is still pretty cringe. Like, think like Dorcas level bulk basically. So, like Arthur, in Siegfried mode, I like to use him as chipping for chipping enemies, but generally I don't really use him much. But that one playthrough I trained him, it was really enjoyable. You can buy Purge at some point and turn him into like a massive 10 range nuke because you have so many Purge users, it doesn't matter how many you're going to use. You can also frontline a little bit if you have trained him, but definitely takes effort because he joins so under-leveled and so late. But definitely fun to use. Storm is a unpromoted nomad. He has a personal weapon called the Stormbringer, I think. I think it gives him +2 speed and it weighs him down by 1, so it's effectively +1 speed, like about as strong as a steel bow, I believe. It's pretty decent. He is trainable in Siegfried mode, but again, he comes back at the same time as Arthur, so it's the same problem of being under-leveled, worse than like FE7 Wrath, for example. So definitely we want to be a little bit like conscious of that. Like, you know, you're gonna have to feed him a lot of XP to catch back up, but the class is good, right? Nomad Trooper is just a fun class to have. Swords and bows are not the greatest weapon types in this game, but it's nice to have a person who can use the high-level bows, and with that he can do sort of decently. I might as well say this, there's like a side quest for like getting all the emblem weapons, and for that you have to deploy Storm in, I think, chapter 23X to unlock some really good hidden gems. So look that up if you haven't already. You definitely want that. You don't have to do anything special with Storm if you're not using him. You don't even have to put him in combat a single time, but just be aware that you need to keep him alive in the chapter he joins in, for example, and then deploy him the chapter, I think the single chapter afterwards, yeah, I think the single chapter afterwards. So keep that in mind. Storm is fine when he's trained, but obviously he's underleveled, so you have to put some effort in. Think FE7 Wrath, but a little bit more. He's not terrible. You can train him a little bit in Siegfried mode. He does just fine. Logan is arguably one of the worst units in the game if you take into account the fact that recruiting him means not getting Ash. Because like I said at the beginning of Secret Mode, there's a route split. If you choose not to trust Logan, then Logan will be your enemy and you have to fight him. He's the boss of a chapter. Whereas if you do choose to trust him, he's also your enemy, but you can recruit him. And you know, that's not a great deal when you're losing out on the hero pre-promotes that one round so many enemies, because Logan does not one on everything. You just get Key a little bit more frail. I think there's a Sword Reaver bandit in a chapter that OKOs him, which is hilarious. And the rest of the chapters isn't too kind to him. Like, there's some brigands he can kill, so it's not impossible to train him. In fact, I did that playthrough. But generally, as far as like Myrmidon Swordmaster options go, even within those, he's not great. And outside of that scope, like almost every class is better. So Logan is funny, but not particularly great. He's really fast and has really high skill. But neither of those are required to be very good. I guess later in the game, when like doubling thresholds are a bit harder to hit, he does have a bit more of a niche in that regard, but not so much so that I'd consider like recommending him. He's definitely a high effort unit, but at least he joined so early that you don't have to like feed him everything for a couple chapters. Like he's just part of your team. He takes a little bit more combat to be good, but he doesn't need to be spoon-fed kills for like a chapter when he's on a level. Like, he just levels at the same pace as the rest of your team with a bit worse combat. Then we have Zack. He's an archer. The best way I can summarize him is imagine FE7 Will. Yeah, it kind of ends there. That's about it. He's not that good. This game does have a lot of really funny bows, like long bows, and like just like a one-shot bow that has one use, but like OKOs about anything. But has like really alpha accuracy, stuff like that. It's a very goofy weapon. There's a lot of goofy weapons like that. If you want to use those, you don't have many options, right? You can use Storm, you can use Rachel, but they join pretty late, so if you want them early on, then I guess you can use Zack. I guess, like, technically Liam exists, he's pretty early too, but Zack would work as well. And if you like raising archers, there's that. Complaint from one of my associates, this game doesn't have an early archer girl. It's true, you only have a late archer girl, or you have an early archer boy, but no early archer girl. So this is the closest thing you have, I guess, if you like early archers. I don't. They have all sorts of issues that we've all gone over like a million times. Archer's not very good in GBA FE, but if you want one, if you want to raise one, this is the one you got. Then there's Sai. He joins at the same time as you, so again, Dragon Valley chapter, pretty dense unit joining there. Sai is very unleveled at the point in the game. He's a fighter, an ex-fighter, so I think like if a level 10 Bartray or Dorcas joins you at that point, or maybe like a level 10 Dart is closer. I think his stats are closer to Darts than anything else. Basis-wise, at least like a Geese. That's kind of what he is. It's very average stats for his level, but then he's also underleveled. And then his class is also Warrior with the awful no speed promotion. It's not a very good look for him. So I think this might be the least deployed unit in the whole game, because he's just not appealing to any kind of audience as well. Like, if it's like an unleveled mage girl, some people are really into that. And if it's like a base level paladin that just mows on everything, that's something I really like. Sai is neither of those things. In fact, he's as far removed as any of those things as he could possibly be. He seems rather boring, and I've never tried using him. He's probably better than I'm giving him credit for, because I'm just making him sound awful. He's more like mediocre. He's got like bad unit feel, on top of not being very good to begin with. So, don't recommend. But, you know, high effort is high effort for a reason. Then we got utility. Utility units are units that I do like recommend using, and in fact some of them I recommend using for the whole game. But I thought I'd separate them from the combat units because they're a little bit different. So Tamiko, Emma, and Rana are all healers. I consider them healers. They can technically attack as well, especially Rana, who joins ready to attack. But I think it's more logical to see them as units that just provide staff utility. So mostly healing, and you should definitely have at least one healer on the field at almost all times. I think Emma's the best of the healers because, you know, she's on a mount, so she has other utility as well. Her combat stats are pretty good when she's raised, but Tamiko does just fine. You have her for Siegfried mode. She can, like, reach her level cap in there if you want to, like, reach level 20 if you want her to. You don't have to, but I sometimes nearly reach it because healing gives more XP in The Last Promise than it does in normal Fire Emblem, I think. So I think I like 20 XP for healing a guy, which is a great improvement over vanilla FE7, so I really like that. So definitely recommend to have at least one of these. Doesn't really matter which between Emma and Tamiko, you both get them back around at the same time, give or take what, 1 or 2 chapters. So yeah, have a healer. Rana can technically attack as well. He's a druid, pre-promoted one that joins around the time the difficulty spikes. He can't really keep up in combat, except like the occasional chip damage and like maybe one-running an armor knight or something. But he has C and stabs, use him a lot. You get like B and stabs, you can use physic. That's pretty helpful as well. So healing is good. Then you got thief utility in Altares. You have to thief for like almost the entire game. Like besides Kevin, he might be the most available unit. Might be wrong on that. So there's a lot of treasure in the Last Promise, a lot of stealable items as well, especially in Siegfried mode. You get elixirs and sell them to get angelic robes, or use the elixirs for, you know, what they're good for, which is healing. So definitely a lot of things for Altares to do. He can do combat. His stats are not that far removed from like Matthew or Colms, but he can get supports with like Kelek and with Tikkun if you're so inclined. So these options in that regard, you don't have to. I did it once and it was okay. Like it was not worth the trouble, but it was funny to have a thief that can actually fight stuff. So if you're into that kind of stuff, or if you just like having all units on the field be trained and ready for combat, I know that those people are there. If you like that, then training Altares might be good. He has an innate crit bonus, which is also fun. He does a little bit more crit, or a little bit more crit rate on enemies than most units do, because he's like Swordmaster crit, I think. So if you like that thief crit animation, that very goofy one where he just does the same attack but it makes the crit sound, then you can have that. So that's all the real units. This is Liuk. He's the convoy. He's the same as Merlinus effectively. The game kind of makes it seem like he can't be trusted. He's gonna run off with your items, but spoilers, he doesn't. So don't worry about that. They just gave him a different character than Merlinus, and you get him way too late. Like the most annoying part of the Last Promise is the part where Liuk isn't there, and you're in like Siegfried mode, and you're just having to discard items over and over because you have too many. You get like way more items than you have convoy space for. But managing that is what you get you the most angelic robes. So definitely sell your items if you're not going to use them. Like if you get like an elixir that you think you're not going to use, just sell it as soon as you can. Free up the space. And then when Liuk joins, enjoy the 100 free items that you've taken for granted for too long. The 100 free item slots. Liuk is great, and there's no reason not to use him every time you have him, just like Merlinus. So just treat him like that. In fact, I think he's not even in danger like ever. I think thinking about the Last Promise, I don't think he's ever really in danger. So don't have to worry about that either. So yeah, that's the Last Promise character guide. That's how I use the units and which units I would use. Feel free to pick as many or as little as you like from each category. Whatever you think you're up to. Last Promise is not a very hard game, but it is a very funny game. It has its issues in both writing and gameplay at times. There's like rain maps that aren't very fun. These flies just keep on coming at me. But overall, it's just an enjoyable experience that just enhances like the whole FE GBA library, I think, more than it detracts from it. I think like it started the whole ROM hacking scene when you think about it. It was like the first completed ROM hack. So if you're a Fire Emblem fan, I definitely recommend playing it. That's all I got for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was useful, or hope you just fell asleep listening to my voice. Either way, thank you for watching. Peace.